Hey guys, what's going on? Welcome back to my workbench. I'm going to be doing another raw run through of a locomotive build again today, and this is going to be the starting point for my next project. We've done some BN SD40-2s in the past. I got some plans on doing some other engines, but this one actually kind of happened by coincidence. This is a unit I've wanted to do for some time, and I was going to save up for it. Found this model super cheap at a train show, and knew right away what I wanted to turn it into. So I brought it back with me, and what it is a Milwaukee Road SD40-2. Athearn has done a few runs of these. This is an Athearn RTR with the newer detailing. It is missing the MU cables. That's because I took those off thinking I was going to part it and then decided I was going to keep it, so go figure. It does have a lot of the nicer details specific for the Milwaukee Road, but we are not going to be keeping it as a Milwaukee Road unit. No sir, we are going to be making this into something else. This is an American EMD. The unit we're going to be building is a GMD prototype, and this is the unit we're going to make. Wheeling and Lake Erie 6315. This is a ex-Algoma Central GMD SD40-2. These are some very peculiar engines, and for the record, if you guys are interested in doing this and want to have a much easier starting point, try to get one of the Bowser GMD SD40-2s. Those are pretty good to start with. However, being that I'm a loco builder, and there's some things I want to change on this engine, being that it's a real interesting cross-pollination of American EMD and GMD, I'd rather just build it with the starting point of an EMD locomotive. That way I have specific parts ready to go that I don't have to try to modify on, say, a GMD unit. For example, a lot of stuff has been changed, like the headlight. This used to be a single headlight. This is now a dual beam standardized EMD headlight. But the thing that's kind of interesting about that headlight is it's actually lower on the hood as a normal EMD. I think it is. It's very subtle, but I think the single nose, or not nose light, but rear hood light on the GMD units was slightly lower. The American engines have it slightly higher, but it's such a minute difference that I think I can just get away with it. But you can kind of see the subtle variation. If you look at those knockout points there, you can kind of see the positioning of the headlight is a lot lower, while on the standardized American units it's pretty much level. We're going to have to do a lot of surgery. If we look at the end here too, we're going to have to remove number boards. We have the Canadian style ergonomic handrails. This is a Canadian feature. This did have the GMD steps like a CP or CN SD40. These have been rebuilt to American steps. The pilots have a lot of interesting specific detailing. The trucks are very basic, easy to do. The fuel tank, very peculiar. It's centered a little bit more forward, and there's a large gap. This is a very short fuel tank, and then there's a lot of equipment hanging in between these sections here. These are all retrofitted during the rebuild process on the when this was a Wisconsin Central unit. They added a lot of these specific parts and things, but the retention tank and some other stuff is still Algoma Central. As for the paint scheme, you notice that it's still in the WC maroon and yellow, or gold, whatever you want to call it. It has the Wheeling and Lake Erie lettering patched over, new number 6315. It's got the American flag that WC and Burlington Northern used. I think I have a decal for those. It's on both sides. It's got the the large WC type all-weather window. I think that might have been taken off at some point in time in the future here. I'm going to be backdating this locomotive at a very specific point when a lot of the locomotive cosmetically got changed, but this is still before it got repainted, because these are all wearing black now. There was 2 of these on the roster that were saved from LTEX in 2007. Front handrail is pretty much the same here. You can see you got the ergonomic handrails there, but again, the steps have been rebuilt, same with the opposite side. So this is still pretty backdated. I think this is still 2008-ish. There are still a lot of GMD features on it, like the snow shields. The P3 was still on the cab roof, the old cast P3. It has the class lights, bells still between the number boards, nose light, modified brake wheel, all the front details. So there's a lot of stuff we're going to actually have to kind of change or mimic to make our model look like a GMD unit. For example, the headlight's going to have to be modified, obviously. We're going to have to trim that down a little bit, remove the class light covers, modify the pilots on both ends. We're going to have to modify the fuel tank. Gonna have to modify the cab side detail, the roof detail. The fans are kind of wonky. These use a low profile fan. However, Athearn does not make these parts, so I'm gonna have to see if I can try to maybe just use the larger fan and then leave one of these smaller ones to make it look like they're mismatched, like the prototype, because the fans on this are, again, very peculiar. Just one of those odd features of these GMD units. The fans got wonked around quite a bit, and if you look at all the WC SD40s they all had these weird fan arrangements, so that was a neat detail. But anyways, again, looking at the paint job, standard WC scheme. I've never done one of these before. I do have some WC maroon on hand. Let me see here. Where is it? There it is. I knew I was going to use this someday, damn it. I've had this for a long time. Still viable too. It's still good. Whenever you can find new bottles of Flocoal paint, get them, because this stuff is gold. This is like the best airbrush paint ever, and unfortunately there's really not any other paint currently that tops it, but I knew I'd use this someday, so I got that. As for gold, let me see here. This might actually work here. This is UP Army Yellow, but the thing about their yellow is it's a little bit darker, so it's more of a golden color. So this might actually work better for the Wheeling and Lake Erie Yellow. Or Wheeling and Lake Erie Yellow. The WC Maroon Yellow scheme. Sorry. So, I think those two will work. And then I'm going to have to get decals. I do have WC decals. I do have Wheeling and Lake Erie decals, but I need to just double check if I have this chevron on the front or if I'm going to have to paint that, because if I do have to paint that, that's going to be a real bear. But we'll see what we got to do with there. That's just going to be something we'll worry about in the future. Right now, the process here is going to be stripping the locomotive down like normal, so I'm going to take every single part cosmetically off, handrails, things like that. Oh, by the way, the handrails on this thing, garbage. They are shot. So these are all going to come off, and I'm probably going to replace them, to be honest with you, because I just can't salvage them. These handrails here I can salvage. The front and back handrails are going to be completely rebuilt, modified. All this is going to have to get changed because the GMD and GMD stanchion lengths are completely different. GMD handrails are a lot longer across. EMD handrails, much shorter. So we're going to have to modify these two. That's going to be a real pain in the ass, but it's going to have to get done. So anyways, we'll start stripping this guy down. I will not have to strip the paint on this. Reason being, because the paint that they did apply to these is so thin, you can actually see through the black. It's peculiar. It wasn't a very good paint job to begin with. Athearn's newer releases of these are slightly better, but the separation line is so thin that I can paint over this and you'd never know that there was a separation line, so I can actually get away with it. So whenever you can get away with a paint job like this without having to strip the paint, take it. The base coat on this essentially will just will basically just serve as a primer, so to speak. So we're still going to prime over this because of the amount of work that we're going to have to do, but this will make it easier. We won't have to completely start from base plastic, basically, if that makes sense. Nothing crazy here, your standard Athearn components. This is the older bulb, as you can see, the older wire, older board. So I have an idea here. I would really like to have a Wheeling and Lake Erie unit that is lead capable, and with this engine I do have the option of being able to actually put powered ditch lights on the Pilot. So if I'm able to do that, I would like to be able to utilize that. I would definitely like to be able to take advantage of that. So let's see, looking at this, I'm gonna have to see if I can actually route them through this. I think I'll be able to. What I'm just going to do is I'm going to strip all this down. I'm going to take the board off, the trucks off anyway. The reason is because I'm going to need to do some frame milling. This whole section here I'm going to have to trim down. If you remember in the prototype photos, this fuel tank needs to be about like this forward. It's in a very awkward position, and unfortunately with the stock frame, I can't really fit that fuel tank over that. So I'm going to try to trim some of that metal off, and hopefully I'll be able to prevent anything getting in the motor. So I'm going to disassemble this and I'm going to do all the hard cutting first. The trucks, all the fuel tank work, all that is going to be where I'm going to start. I always like to start with these underbody details first because these are the easiest components to work on, and it's just a heck of a lot easier when I get the frame out of the way. I can just set it aside. It's pretty much powered and ready to go at that point, and all I have to do is then worry about finishing the shell, because that's going to be the main component here. That's going to be the piece where all the weathering is going into, or the most part of the weathering, and all the detailing and everything like that. While the frame only needs minimal work. So this is why I really like to do it this way. I've been building all of my engines this way, and it saves me a heck of a lot of time and a lot of headache. Instead of having to try to do all this and then tackle framework first. Start in small sections at a time and just chew off little bits at a time. And it'll make your modeling a lot more pleasurable, a lot more easy, because then you're not having to sit there and fret about, oh, well, I got to work on all this, but I still got to go back to this section and this section. Cut everything down in manageable chunks. So, anyways, I'm going to start doing that now, and I'll show you guys the progress. So that's the fuel tank after I've detailed it. Pretty easy. I built the large waste retention tank on the end, and then I also did all the plumbing. So, you can see I plumbed that. It's pretty straightforward. There'll be some more stuff that'll go over the fuel tank, but that's going to have to wait till I actually install it. So at this point it fits on pretty well. You can see we slide it all the way forward. We got plenty of room between that truck and then the front truck, which is prototypical. There's going to be a box that hangs in the front of the truck here, and then there's some plumbing and a what is it? It's one of those spitter valves, one of those large spitter valves that'll go here that we're going to have to retrofit as well. Let me see. Oh, wait a minute. You know what I'm doing? We're looking at the wrong end of the unit here. Or wait, no, that's right. Yeah. It's just confusing because everything's disassembled. I'm sorry. So yeah, no, this is the rear end of the locomotive. That's the front. So there'll be a little box that goes here that I'm going to go ahead and start building next. So the cab thus far has been the easiest part to modify. All I had to do was modify the bottom portion of the light housing between the number boards. On the GMD units, it's all flat and flush, and on the EMD units, there's that little rounded protrusion at the very base, and I had to just simply shave that down, and then I filled that in with styrene and a little bit of plastic cement. So I won't need to do any additional filling. That'll just get painted up and you won't even see it. I made the little cover by removing the headlight. I added a styrene plate, and then I added the new GMD bell. I got the little classification lights there. And then on the top of the cab, I got the area that I filled with putty. I also made the little notch between the number boards, and that is the little space that was cut out for an airline, and then the horn would have been mounted here too. It's just a little notch that some of these GMD units have. Looking at the nose here, what this is an 88-inch nose that I had in my parts source, and I modified this to be a GMD nose. The stock nose is an 81-inch nose with the ratchet brake. I replaced the brake wheel and everything on this with my own scratch-built parts. And then I have my headlight, which is a Details West casting. I installed that, drilled through it. I made the little notch cut out for the headlight so it's nice and flush sitting in there. Not too much else to do with the nose. I might have to make the little vent for the side. I might have to remove that and change it. On the shell itself, first big thing I've had to do was remove the class lights on the nose, or rather the rear hood. And I've also changed the little sections on the pilot. These aren't cut out like on American locomotives. On some engines they have changed these for access to the coupler lift bar. It's like a little knockout that they just torch out of the pilot plate. But on the GMD units, most of this is all one solid piece and it doesn't have those knockouts. So if we look at the, I guess first I need to pull it back up here wherever it is. Hang on, let me see. If I can get the thing open. There we go. On the GMD pilots there, you can see that these are all a solid piece. It does not have these knockouts. While on like an American engine, it'll have those knockouts. So I had to fill those in with styrene. And I just used 40-inch. I shaved it down to size, and it's very hard to see, but I very carefully sanded and cut them in so that they fit right over those existing Athearn parts. And then I just installed, pretty much just installed the putty onto the areas to fill in all the cracks. So that's on both ends. I also filled some holes up on the deck. Remember, we're going to be making our own handrails for the front, so I just went ahead and filled in all of the deck holes for the stanchions, and also the little cutout for the MU detail piece that would go there on each end. So all that's been changed. I still got to start working on some other hood details. I'm going to remove the fans because if you remember, the fans are really wonky on this particular engine. I'm going to have to change these out to get some different fan heights, so that's going to be kind of interesting. It's the first time I've ever really done this, other than I tried to do it on HLCX 6091, which I have down there, but in that case that ended up being a situation where I had to completely scratch build my own fan, which was not fun, and I would really not like to have to do that again if I can help it. So other than that, I do have the chassis prepped, and I have the trucks and the fuel tank done with primer weathering. You can see with this, I just went in. Ended up getting this really weird effect though. It looks like the paint kind of ran or something. But all that will get covered back up with some more paint. I'll be able to blend that out. But the fuel tank's pretty much prepped. All the truck frames are detailed. They have the airlines running between the cylinders, and then this side has the speed recorder. But the trucks are basically very simple. They're the easiest part to do. I modified the chassis to fit the fuel tank, obviously, and it's not here right now, but I do have it prepped and ready to go. It's not in this drawer. No, it's not. So other than that, I'm going to let this dry up, and then tonight when I get off work, I'll come back, sand these parts up, and then I'll start working on the shell a little bit more. Okay guys, real quick, I'm modifying the frame here. I've gotten a little bit of work done. I'll show everything else I've done so far, but I wanted to show you guys the way I drilled out these ditch lights on the Pilot. This is the first time I've done this. I did make a mistake and I made this one hole too large, but you can see the holes are drilled out big enough to allow the LED to pass through into the custom ditch lights, which I'm making, which I'll show in a second. So I made the custom ditch lights to fit the bulb through, and I've also made custom lift rings. Now these are similar to these on this end. At this point I've added all the Pilot details there, so these are dummy ditch lights. But on the front here I want to have actual ditch lights, so I haven't done any other detailing other than this. So I've drilled out the holes with my nice bit here, and I'm going to go in and I'm going to start gluing my lift rings on, which you can see I've already prepared by drilling holes in them. The bottom holes are obviously where the light will pass through, and then the ditch light housing will go over those, so I'm going to have to be very careful about lining everything up, but we're going to try that here real quick. There's the front lift rings installed. And then these are the ditch lights, which I have installed. These are Detail Associates ditch lights. I glued these onto a large piece of styrene, drilled them out first, then I cut them out into their specific shape. Now the real ditch lights on the real unit are a Canadian style ditch light, which I don't really feel like making. There are castings for them, but in this case to actually light them, it wouldn't work because I'd have to take so much off the front anti-climber to actually fit them on, and I'd also have to space these a little bit closer. These are already a little bit closer than I would like. These on this end are more prototypical. They're very close to the edge of the steps. I've had to move the ones on the front inwards a little bit to actually be able to drill through them without going through that step, but you can see they are cut all the way through. So I'm just going to install these ditch lights right over those, and we'll wait till the very last stages to actually run the LEDs through these. So here's crossing our fingers that this works. Okay, and then there's the test fit of the LEDs, just documenting that. They're not in all the way. I either will just use the bulbs like lenses, or I will put actual Detail Associates lenses on these, but I'll cross that bridge in the final stages. I'll decide what I want to do. But the way I grooved them out, they pass through just fine. The newer Athearn bulbs are really nice. They fit in a lot of tighter places now, unlike the older ones. So I should just be able to simply modify the frame and fit these through, and then guide them up to the board when the time comes. But you can see that's a big first for me. I've never done working ditch lights on any of my own models, so I'm actually very proud of that so far. But we haven't even begun to scratch the surface of this build or really any of the electrical, so I won't be patting myself on the back too much more here. Let's go ahead and get all the other details on. So we're going to have the front plow, couple of lift bar, air hose,
and probably some other stuff. MU cables, things like that will come later. Note on this end here too, by the way, there's no knuckle brackets. These don't have knuckle brackets, just the grab irons for the air hoses. That's a generally something you do see on GMD units. They have handrails to keep the cables inside. So I added those, but I'm going to go ahead and make another one of these cut bars, and we'll put that on the front. On the end. Alright guys, I got the paint done on the engine so far. That being the main paint coat. I used Tamiya paints to actually do this. As it turns out, the hull red that they have is pretty good for WC maroon. The yellow I used actually worked pretty well as well. And it came out okay. Some of the lines are not very crisp. As you can see, they're a little bit rough, so I'm going to have to try to see if I can scrape some of that up and fix it. And that just comes down to the tape I was using. I forgot that I was using the really crappy Scotch blue tape. It also leaves a residue behind, and as you can see, it did leave some residue on the yellow, so it has a really sticky texture to it, which I got to try to remove before I can put decals on. So it's very annoying. So anyways, that tape is not going to be used again for locomotives like this, because it did sort of ruin the paint job, so to speak. I did get some basic painting done, like I touched up the paint on the pilots, and then I did some of the painting on the nose. None of the grab irons are painted yet, and I did just install the front handrail stanchions with the new wiring, and then the MU receptacles. Those will all get painted by hand. I got to do decaling on the rear hood, and this will all get decaled, and then I'll touch up the paint around the decals. The cab turned out okay, and the nose is ready for decals as well, although I wish I would have painted the front of the nose yellow. That would have made the decaling easier, because the issue is I'm putting a very thin yellow decal over this, and you're going to see some of that red underneath, so I'm going to have to try to see if I can fix that, or at least try to prevent that as much as possible. Maybe just, maybe if I put the decal on, then brush paint it somehow, I don't know. But it's coming along, and you can see it's really starting to take shape. It looks like a proper unit now. But it'll look a lot better once decals and all of the hand painting effects are done. The roof came out pretty good too. I removed the masking on these, and I just hand painted the tops of the fans, and that's how I was able to keep the fan blades inside the fan housings silver, because I didn't want to paint those. If I had spray painted those, the fan blades would have been red like everything else, and I wanted to keep those clean. So hand painting worked out well. I just touched up the paint, like I said, and then I did do some touch up on this side. So this side is a little bit in better shape than the opposite side, the engineer side. So speaking of that, in terms of engineer side details, we're going to have to also do the cab interior. I still got to build that, and then we'll finish the handrails, and then we'll continue to do the paint touch up. I also had to add this little extension, because I forgot that the GMD steps are on both sides. This is a grab iron on EMD units. This is a step on GMDs, and it has a step guard, just like the opposite side. So after I painted it, I realized I forgot that detail, so I just grafted a piece of styrene in to blend that together, and then I'll touch that up with some more paint, and that should fix the problem. So it's just little things like that, like you really got to pay attention, because you miss stuff sometimes. But it is starting to take shape. Alright, so we've made some significant progress over the last couple weeks. I got the cab and everything sealed up properly, so the numbers are done. Number boards are reinstalled, although I might change these, because as you can see, they're not fitting too well in the gaskets. So I don't know, I might change those out. I'm not satisfied with them. Also, one of the number boards got fudged during the dry time. The paint was perfect until I got this weird bump in it, so I don't know. I might replace them. Stuff like that really does bother me, but other than that little thing, everything else turned out good. The car body is finished. All the decals are applied. I ended up using the microscale decals to do the nose chevrons. I added all of the MU receptacles, painted a couple of lift bars, and I added the decals to the long hood, including all the warning labels. The P3 is installed. All the decaling on the rear hood is finished. That is again the microscale decal. I ended up just painting the entire hood maroon, and just decaled that. So that ended up being a lot simpler in the first place. I re-decaled this side of the long hood with the microscale decals, put on the decals for the hood, same thing on the nose. So overall, we've made some really good progress, and it's really starting to look like the prototype now. A lot of these fine details are really starting to really tie everything together, and the paint just looks phenomenal on this. It's a very colorful paint job. I love the Wisconsin Central paint, and I love the GMD features, so it's like the best of both worlds on this locomotive. That's one of the reasons I chose to model it. But anyways, yep, all the decals are complete, and the next step here is going to be weathering and then installation of handrails. We're going to have to finish scratch building the stanchions for the front handrails, because remember, they're different compared to an American EMD. The GMD handrails are like an ergonomic shape, so we're going to have to scratch build those. One other thing, I did complete the safety sill striping all over the locomotive. That is all real reflective tape. That's Western safety tape. So the whole thing is completely reflective. And like I said, the next time you see this engine, I will be getting into some nice weathering touches. Well guys, I made some more excellent progress, and the big thing I had to do for the weathering step was I had to airbrush fade the entire top portion of the roof. But you'll notice on this particular engine, it's very rough and crappy looking, and that was done on purpose by very blotchily applying the paint with the airbrush, just splattering it all over the place, very uneven, especially around the exhaust hatch. Think about heat buildup and things like that. That usually accelerates a paint fade like this. And again, on this particular ex-Wisconsin Central unit, the fading is quite significant. Matter of fact, I think the roof is actually painted gray. But in this case, this is a compensation. Since I didn't paint any of this gray, I'm just doing an airbrush fade, kind of as a creative liberty, to at least make it look somewhat like it does. Because even now, the real unit, well, before it was repainted, had this gray either fade or gray paint job on the roof, and it completely chiseled up like this. So it works well for the model. It looks right. Faded the nose down, blotched up the cab, and then once I did all the paint work, I then took Q-tips, my usual trick, dipped them in alcohol, and then very carefully blotched up all these different portions of the locomotive on the dynamic blister, around the fans, on the hood itself. You can see it's bleeding down the top there. And I just peeled some of that paint back up. Same thing on the ductwork there and on the top of the cab. Especially on this side, you're going to see this most notably, because on this side there's a lot of paint peeling. And I replicated this using the airbrush, and then I also went in with some acrylic dry brushing work to model that peeling paint. Darkened the grills up, and then I put some rust, some burnt umber rust in the fans. Darkened the grills there, and then you can see I did a lot of the oil washes on the hood as well, so I filled in some of those door cracks, some of the streaks of grease. This unit was very clean for its age, approaching its time getting repainted. It was in very good shape, I will say that. And so it's actually one of my cleaner engines that I've done, so I really don't have to do anything else in terms of weathering. I will have to weather up the pilots, dry up the sills just a little bit more, and it's all going to be mostly powder work at that point. I also finished up the interior. You can see you got the seats in there. Cab interior seats. Control stand. And if we look really carefully, you can kind of see there is actually the speed recorder in the top portion. I love doing those little details. So once I did all that, finished up the cab interior, glued the cab in place, reinstalled the steps, installed the new step on the front there as well, installed the nose, and then I also installed the little electrical cabinet behind the cab. And then I'm currently painting that to match with acrylic. So you can see that looks really good. So we're pretty much ready to finish the weathering up on the deck of the engine. You can see that's all hit up with the pre-fade. Then I'll be able to do all the powder work. Then I'll be able to reinstall the handrails on the sides. So it'll be the side handrails and then the cab handrails first. Once I get those done, they're painted and everything, then I can fabricate the new handrails for the front stanchions and then the side stanchions as well. Those are all going to be that ergonomic GMD style handrail. So I'm going to have to make 4 of those. 4 for each end, so 8 total. So it's a lot of wire bending. Fortunately, I've done it enough times that I can get away with it. Oh yeah, I also did paint the gaskets on the windows. It's a nice little finishing touch. So overall, it's looking really good. I'm really happy with it. I have all that pretty much tied up, and it's looking very nice. Setting that aside, bringing this in, I have the chassis prepped. The only thing this needs now is the final powder work on the trucks. It's going to be a nice big dusting of white powder to make it look nice and dusty. I got the bulbs installed, but I still need to get a decoder ordered for this. I really should just try to save up a couple $100 and just buy a bulk pack of decoders. So that this isn't a problem, because I continually run into this issue where it's like I start building a locomotive and then realize I don't have a decoder. So, kind of annoying, but it's why you need to kind of take inventory and make sure you actually have stuff in advance. A lot of people, the smarter modelers, especially older modelers like Dan Cortopassi, for example, Brian Bana, for example, they don't do any kind of locomotive builds until they have all of the parts stockpiled and they know that they have what they need. They do an inventory and then proceed with the build. I just start building stuff because I get excited and then realize, oh, I don't have the part for this, I don't have the part for that, and that's what happened in this case because I just realized that I didn't have components I needed. Speaking of components, I do still need to add the all-weather window to this side of the cab there. That'll be installed and painted, so I got to do that next too. What time is it? Oh, it's time to tell them about the locomotive. Oh, that's right. So the unit is finished, officially. It does have a decoder in it. I installed that the other day. It's nicely tucked in underneath a dynamic brake blister. So it just needs programmed and then I'll be able to actually run this thing. Let's talk about some of the details that I completed on this. During the final process of the build, I was able to reassemble the handrail stanchions, as you can see. And then I was able to put the handrails on the front and I was able to complete the handrails on the sides with new stanchions and things of that sort. And what I'm going to show you guys is the front pilot, the way I finished these up. So after I did all of the handrail work, which was making the brass stanchions here, the grab parts, I was then able to hang the plow, install the air hoses, the couplers, I put the lenses in the ditch lights, and then I mounted the large MU jumper cable there. And you can see I like to make my cables look like they're hanging, like they have some weight. I like to use the Athearn MU cables, the older MU cables preferably, and then I use Athearn bulb wire to make my MU jumpers. So I got those hung, they look really nice, they look like they have weight to them. And then I made all the side railings here as well. Scratch made those from wire. And then I finished all of the weathering for the most part after I did all that. You can see I also got all the mud splatter, dust effects, and grime on the pilots there as well, and that all looks really good. Now, on this side here, if we look at the cab and underneath it, we got the trucks finished up. The cab's nicely weathered in place now, and I got all the dust and grime and mud all over the trucks. The fuel tank is nicely weathered. You can see we got all the streaks all over the sides there, and I actually modeled some of the side scraping. There's lots of mud and things on the retention tank, and I also added the new air filter there. I had to very carefully kind of tuck that in the frame where it wasn't going to interfere with the swivel of the truck. There's a much better look at that piece there. You can see it's just painted silver, and then I did a nice grime wash over it to make it look nice and dirty. Notice all the fine detail on the trucks with all that mud splatter and dust effects. That's all done with powders. It all looks really good. And then on the rear pilot there's the new handrails as well. These Athearn stanchions are really annoying because they flex out of position and they're just absolute garbage, to be honest with you. I'm really considering doing my own handrails from now on because every time I try to recycle and reuse the handrails off these locomotives, you got to really do a lot of bending to try to actually get them straightened back out, and even still the handrails are really bent. And I know everyone makes the excuse about handrails being bent in real life, and that's true, but it's just one of those details in scale size. It just does not look right. And what appears to be a minor dent with some of these handrails sometimes in real life would be something that they would be torching off and replacing. So I try to keep them as straight as I can. I really love the weathering. I love that patchy paint on the sides there. I did a lot of dust effects in the grills there too. Lots and lots of dust. And Wheeling and Lake Erie units in particular get a lot of this white mud and a lot of this white dust, and that's just because they haul a lot of rock, a lot of grade work, so they're doing a lot of use of sand and things like that, for example. So these engines in particular here in the east get very dusty and very dirty. All that came out really nice. You can see I got the bulbs installed in the headlight housing there. Then there's the new GMD railings on the back. These ones were a real challenge to get just right. I had to make a couple sets of these and then fit them. I got the MU cables, the air hose, the jumper, that's all done. And then on this side here, again I had to fit my own section of rail to properly space these back out, but Once I did that, then I was just able to go in and do all the work to the sides, finish the trucks up, finish all the grime there. The fuel tank looks really nice again on that side. And then I really like the cab with the used to be 3-piece window housing. That's something really unique. It's overall an extremely unique engine because not only are Wisconsin Central units pretty sharp with that paint scheme, but being that this one is a patch out, and the way W&LE Carry patched this one, it's a different engine altogether. It just looks very unique, and it's one I've seen a couple times in person, and it's really one I wanted to model for a number of years, and I'm glad I got around to it. So that's the 6315, and from this point on we'll be moving on to some other projects. But I want to thank you guys for sticking through this video here. I know it got a little long, but I really hope you enjoy my builds, and you can be sure to stay tuned for more videos just like this coming up. I already got the next unit I'm going to do, which is the 5391 that finally came in from Athearn after waiting for like 100 years. And I'm super excited to get started working on this guy. That'll be the next engine I would do. And I might film this one, I'm not sure. I might take a little break from the filming because I've made a lot of videos lately. I filmed probably about, I think, 12 videos this year of different projects and builds, which is really another reason it's kind of slowed me down. So I don't know, we'll come back to that. Anyways, guys, I want to thank you so much for watching this. I really appreciate it. Subscribe here on YouTube for more content just like this, and be sure to stay tuned for more. Thanks for watching. See you in the next one.